Welcome back again to the video blog. This is Fort Lauderdale on ice, otherwise known as Toronto. My name's Adam Daniel Mezei, and thanks again for watching. So as most of you will already know, and of course I'll insert the link in the notes below, of course, the late president of the Czech Republic, Vaclav Havel, passed away on Sunday. The great statesman, Vaclav Havel, the former dissident, and what could be said, the poet-president as well, who will be, of course, buried on the 23rd of December in Prague, in the Czech Republic. Something I read in the comments to that Havel clip that I recorded earlier a couple of days ago kind of dismayed me, and the person that left it was basically saying that she couldn't find any material on YouTube from the West, from abroad, that basically was demonstrating some support for Havel in the English language, in other words, for an international audience, let's just say. Not because I'm some kind of a language fascist, which I'm completely not, but something that could be in English, that could be shared with the rest of the world, that demonstrated to Czechs in the Czech Republic, and abroad, but in the Czech Republic, that people outside of the Czech Republic cared about Havel in a way that was beyond Al Jazeera, the Telegraph, the Guardian, the CBC, whatever. Videos about Václav Havel that supersede just the standard news item or the 30-second spot. And I was like, I had not really intended to leave a video that basically was that particular strategy. But then as I realized it, I thought to myself, for the rest of this week, I'm just going to be recording things about Václav Havel because there's so much about the late president, dissident, poet, playwright, thinker, statesman. There's so much about Václav Havel that I was inspired by when I was living in the Czech Republic from 2000 to 2010. And I'm going to talk some more about those things for the rest of this week until Václav Havel's funeral. So, to all of you who have left comments at the link, which I'll be inserting, of course, in the notes below, thank you again for leaving your comments. It's been a really inspiring week about Czech things, and thanks again. Most of you will know that a lot of Czechs during communism had defected to Canada. Prominent authors like Josef Skvorecky, or if you're from Canada, Joseph Skvorecky. Sorry, I just can't stand when people botch the Czech names. Skvorecky, Josef, or Josef Skvorecky. Say that again. A few times in the mirror, you'll get it straight. Came to Canada because Canada was close to Europe, but not the United States, which was not necessarily easy to get into. And Canada was a haven for Czechoslovaks that were looking to boost up their opportunities, or basically abscond from communism, which was during normalization in the late 60s, and, of course, after the Prague Spring and in the 70s. This was a place where they could basically get their creative juices on and, opine about things in the Czech Republic, well, of course, in Czechoslovakia at the time, in a way that they could if they were living in Czechoslovakia. They just couldn't do it. Another interesting note for people that don't know this, and for all you Westerners that are watching this video that don't know, normalizace, or normalization, was a term that was given by the Soviets to the Czechoslovaks, which is the typical Soviet newspeak, Orwellian style, where normalizace means it's normal for parents to inform on their children, and vice versa. It's normal for neighbors to snitch on each other. It's normal for people to not talk to each other in the street. It's normal for people to engage in artistic pursuits that are completely bereft of any meaning. It's normal for people to kowtow to the regime. It's normal for people to be sycophantic to the Soviet Union. It's normal for people to hate Westerners. It's normal for people to be afraid. It's normal for people to hate each other. And it's not normal. But of course, the word normalizace is meant to indicate that it is completely normal, which is the irony of ironies of the post-Prague Spring period. Canada was a place where Czechoslovaks could come and, of course, be free, be open, develop, raise their families. I met a lot of people that had returned to Czechoslovakia, and then latterly, of course, the Czech Republic post-Velvet divorce, who grew up in this country. There are some very good examples. For example, Radio Prague radio.cz or radio.cz, Jan Vellinger, if you're from here, Jan Vellinger is one of those children. He actually is, if you don't know Jan Vellinger, by the way, if you're a subscriber of Vodafone in the Czech Republic, if you get any kind of a voice greeting on the Vodafone system, is Jan Vellinger's voice, by the way. If you hear a message in Czech or English which basically states that the subscriber is not available, that's Jan Vellinger's voice. And Jan Vellinger, of course, is a Canadian child of Czechoslovak parents. So interesting little state of affairs that most people won't know about, that Canada had a very close tie, and in particular, Myburgh here in Toronto was one of the places where people liked to abscond because it was a big city, it was close to Europe, it wasn't in Vancouver, which in those days, in the 70s, was completely off the map. It was where you went to totally run away from things. And there was a nice welcoming community here. I think we still have a Masaryk Square in this town. I've never seen it, believe it or not, but apparently people say there's a Masaryk town where Czechs and Slovaks hang. And so that's an interesting factoid that most people didn't know about. And of course, when Havel had visited Ottawa, which is our capital city, he was quick to, of course, pay respects to all of the help that Canada had given, during those years, under the Trudeau years, the Pierre Elliott Trudeau years, and of course the Brian Mulroney years, when Czechs had come here, and Slovaks, of course, had come here to get their freedom on, which was very important. Canadians continue to play a very prominent role in the thoughts of Czechs today. It's not easy for Czechs to come to Canada, unfortunately. We have a tremendous problem with the visa situation. I don't want to get into the politics of it because I'm going to get a whole bunch of spam comments about people telling me about what they think about Roma Gypsies, and I don't want to get into that. I could get into that if you want. Just let me know, and I can get into that in another piece. But that's not the point. This is a tribute to Vaclav Havel. So, of course, it's not easy to come to Canada for Czechs. They have to get a visa. We're trying to work on that. You're always welcome. I'm very bullish on Czech things. I'm very bullish on the Czech language. I'm very bullish on Czech stuff. Of course, I spent a lot of time there. Of course, I have blood in the region, so that's another reason why I'm interested. And just to let you know that Czechs and Canadians are tied. Spojení. We are connected, no matter what, because that'll always go down in history as a nation who came to the call, to the aid of the Czechs and Czechoslovaks at the time when there was a need for it. And if the Americans would have permitted it, the Canadians would have marched on in to Prague and helped out if the Russians wouldn't have occupied with their tanks. Just like the Canadians were the fourth largest contingent, apropos, in Korea. Most people don't know that. We sent 6,100 troops to the conflict in the 1950s. I don't see why Canadians wouldn't have responded to the call again. And most importantly, let's conclude with Paul Wilson, who is, of course, a Northern Ontario resident. I believe he lives on the Bruce Peninsula, which is close to Tobermory, which is another place I've spent a considerable amount of time. Paul Wilson is, of course, Václav Havel's official, semi-official biographer, and most of Havel's great ideas came to me thanks to Paul Wilson, who, of course, was, I believe he was a guitar player or a bassist in the Plastic People of the Universe, or as the Czechs like to say, Plastické, which is the band that was, of course, censored by the Czechoslovak communist regime. Paul Wilson still goes and travels to the Czech Republic to, of course, give speeches. But in those days, nobody knew what was going to be going on because the Czechoslovak Communist Party was the hardest of the hardline communist parties in all of the bloc countries, probably first or second in line after the East Germans. But anyway, Paul Wilson, of course, is a staunch supporter of Václav Havel's work, and I have to thank Paul Wilson, who is a fellow Canuck, for giving me an access into Václav Havel's thoughts, and in particular Havel's last book, which was To the Castle and Back, which I thought was extraordinary, and of course I read that when I was still living in Prague. But I'll have you know, if you have never touched any of Havel's works, get into it. Paul Wilson is the guy who made it all possible. Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Czechs. And thank you to, I guess, Alanis Morissette for like a wicked track. Thank you, thank you. My name, of course, Adam Daniel Mezei. You can follow me, The Real ADM, on Twitter, or I'm on Facebook. Would love to hook up with you there. And in case you want to know what I do, I market and distribute independent films and documentaries, pmdforhire.com. But I'm just an interested guy in all kinds of things, and especially Václav Havel, R.I.P. coming back to you with more throughout the rest of this week, and to all my Czech friends and commenters, thanks again for watching. Take care, and všechno nejlepší.